Football and the UFL are officially back, and we are off to a great start. That's right. We went an impressive 5-1 in UFL Week 1, and we're looking to do even better for UFL Week 2. So stay tuned for UFL Week 2 game breakdowns and best bets. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus Bets. What is up, folks? I am your host, the DGen Doc, and that is right. Look, hey, I could say it. Everybody could say it. The UFL is back. Football is back. We came off a nice week 1 where we finally, despite being in the middle of March, end of March, we got football back, and that's all we can ask for. League kicked off year 2. Look, those home stadiums, crowds didn't quite live up to par, but the action did, and things went just about as we expected in week 1. Again, if you tailed last week, you must have had a wonderful, wonderful day or weekend really. 5-1 overall, 2-0 on our best bet, 1-0 on our DGen play at the plus 200 there. Michigan Panthers came through. The over for the San Antonio and the Arlington Renegades game came through. Only thing we really missed on was Arlington. Again, 5-1 on the bets. Quick little recap there of week 1. As you can see the scores, I'm sure you all watched, or at least check scores here if you were getting down on some of this action here. Decent amount of blowouts. Really the best game coming at the end. Memphis and Michigan was a little bit closer. A pick 6 from Kai Nakua really put that over the edge. And then the DC Defenders taking down the back-to-back champions in the Birmingham Stallions. So what a week. Look, we are not going to spend too much time on week 1 in the past. Definitely going to get to these week 2 games here. We've got another 4-game slate as we're going to have every week. We got 1 game on Friday, 1 game on Saturday, and 2 games on Sunday. I am expecting a little bit more of some competitive matchups here. Week 1, a little bit feeling out. Week 2, we get to see really who these teams are. And there's a lot of changes. And, that gets me to, I was talking about in my preseason episode, power rankings, things like that. Let's just take a look where I have these teams after week 1 here. So a big adjustment here for the power rankings from what I had preseason. Obviously, the biggest movement coming from really Arlington for me. Right now, St. Louis, Arlington, both really won in blowout fashion. I think both really impressive. The only reason that I don't have Arlington at 1 and St. Louis right now is just because St. Louis, they were a playoff team last year. They've had that continuity. They've kind of shown it over a little bit longer of a scale. But Arlington wins was super impressive. Look, I was someone who typically thinks pretty highly of this Brahmas team. I was riding them last year. They were the runner-up in the whole UFL. Made it to the championship game. They beat St. Louis in the playoffs to get there. And San Antonio had handled Arlington last year, and Arlington came out and just beat the living crap out of them. Arlington can run the football, and I will get to this as I do my game breakdowns. But man, that's probably the biggest shakeup. And as you can tell, Michigan Panthers for me, wide variety depending on if they have Bryce Perkins taking snaps or if for whatever reason Mike Nolan can't open his eyes and he wants to trot out Danny Etling back onto the field. Huge difference there. At the bottom, Memphis and Houston. But if I could, I would put a lot of space between Houston and the rest of the league here. So that's just kind of an idea of how I have it. Power rankings going into week 2. But don't worry, because we're going to break down every game and we're going to get much more into these matchups. Of course, give out some actionable information. Finish up with our best bets and then our DGen play. So we had a great week 1. Let's look to build off this in week 2. Going for the full sweep this time as opposed to just the 5-1 measly record there. Without further ado, let's get right to it. Look, I talked about Friday again is going to be nice little Friday, Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. So fill up your whole weekend with some professional primetime football. We're starting with the Birmingham Stallions, now the 0-1 Birmingham Stallions, heading to the 1-0 Michigan Panthers. This is 8 p.m. Eastern time in Detroit, Michigan, in the Dome there in Ford Field. Birmingham laying a 1.5 on the road there, -115, -130 on the money line. Michigan Panthers catching a 1.5, plus little bit outdated there. Sorry, plus 110 on the money line there is the Michigan Panthers. Cashing a point and a half at home. Over under sitting at 38.5 points. Look, this is a bit of a revenge matchup. They are division rivals, the USFL conference rivals there. They played 3 times last season. Michigan lost 19-20. They lost 20-13. And in the playoffs, the most recent time they played, they lost 18-31. Michigan was up early and had a lead at halftime before letting that game slip away in the playoffs there. So Michigan has come very close to beating this Birmingham team 3 times last year. Could not get it done. And I think that is going to be on their mind, and that is a big reason why I'm going to be taking Michigan, the home dog, at plus 1.5 there at minus 105. Couple things I think we can take away from last week's game. One, I am going to make this assumption, and maybe this is giving some of these coaches a little bit too much credit, but I'm going to make the assumption that Mike Nolan, and head coach of the Michigan Panthers, and that Michigan Panthers coaching staff has eyes, and they can see how much better of a team they were with Bryce Perkins as opposed to Danny Etling. I think this Michigan team, Bryce Perkins, not only is he electric, but he just had better command of the offense. He was able to use his legs effectively. He ran 6 times, did not pick up a huge amount of yardage, but it was in key moments or to use his legs to scramble around. Also, the threat of his ability to run really kind of opened up the running game for them. So, yeah, I'm going to lean into the fact that they understand Perkins is going to be their guy. And look, the biggest takeaway, one of the biggest takeaway, of the weekends for me was the Birmingham Stallions have an offensive line problem. This is not something we've kind of known from this team. The offensive line is a giant concern right now. They give up 8 sacks to the DC Defenders. I spoke about how I think this DC Defenders team was going to be better as far as their defense on paper looked to be improved. And Greg Williams is a guy who definitely likes to bring blitzes and send exotic looks. But 8 sacks in one game, that is not very good there. Adding everything together, the Birmingham only passed for a net total of 16 passing yards. And most of their yards really just came from Alex Magoo running around for his life and picking up some scrambles. So I think that, who also has a really good defensive line, the Michigan Panthers. They can get after you. They've got the UFL sack leader in Breland Speaks there. They have a couple of pieces off the edge and in the interior. I like this defensive line, one of the best defensive lines in the league, and they're going up against a very suspect group in that offensive line for the Birmingham Stallions. So give me Michigan. I think they got revenge on their mind. Bryce Perkins is going to take them to the promised land, and they're going to be able to tee off on that very porous offensive line that we saw for the Birmingham Stallions. Now, my other play here for this first matchup, I'm going to go with the under 38.5 points sitting at minus 110. I think really for both these teams, we could say defenses are a bit ahead of offenses there. As anemic as Birmingham's offense was, their defense only gave up 18 points in that game to DC. They were put in a lot of bad positions and they didn't get a ton of rest, and they really kind of stood up to the challenge there. As much as I do like Michigan in this game, they're not really an explosive offense. When they're at their best, they're a very, methodical offense. They kind of move down the field there. Sometimes they stall in the red zone. They have to settle for field goals. Michigan are not really a team that they don't have Jake Bates anymore. So BT Potter is their kicker, and he's a bit limited. Only went 2 for 4 in the field goals. He's not have a huge leg, really not great from long range. So that may be some punts or going for it on 4th down in kind of that dead man zone there in the 40s around there plus territory. Where I talked about Birmingham, their offensive struggles. I think this Michigan defensive line, this front 7, is going to be able to get after Alex Magoo. Those running backs really did not get a lot of daylight there. Again, their entire offense was essentially predicated on Magoo just running around for his dear life, which did not result in a lot of points, only putting up 11 points total against DC. Michigan's another team I think have good defenses. So really, defenses ahead of offenses here. So give me the under 38.5 there at minus 110. All right, for this next game, moving over to Saturday. And on Saturday, we've got the Memphis Showboats taking off. They are playing Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern, taking on the DC Defenders there. DC again playing at home. You've got Memphis catching 8 on the road. They are plus 310 on the money line. DC laying 8 at home at minus 395. Over under sitting at 37. Big spread here. We've got a couple big spreads. Really, everything but the first game. It has a pretty, above spread of 7 or above there. In this one, I think some news that we definitely need to talk about. One of the biggest reasons I was fading Memphis and all over Michigan last week was the fact that head coach for the Memphis Showboats, Ken Wisenhunt, he left the team last week. It was an emergency kind of leave of absence. Sounds like a family health situation. He's back with the team. He was announced back, early in the week that he's back with the team. He was not only the head coach, he was the offensive play caller. So I think this is absolutely massive for Wisenhunt to be back into the building there. That is big news. Now, DC, on the other hand, the Defenders, their head coach, Reggie Barlow, their ex-head coach, I should say, he is still gone. He is not coming back, right? So the interim coach there stepped up, and he got in a little bit of a dust-up with Skip Holtz there. Apparently he's claiming Skip Holtz called him a doorman or something like that, but that was, definitely heated. And dare I say, the Gatorade was dropped, right? DC was very much feeling themselves and celebrating and talking a ton of shit to the Birmingham Stallions. I get it. They just beat, the back-to-back-to-back champions, the defending champions in the UFL. You're hyped, but it's week one, man. Let's slow your roll there. Good for the interim coach there to get the W, but they really were celebrating that. And I came away very impressed with the DC Defenders defense. Still have major question marks about that offense. Now, their offensive line does seem to be improved, which is, great because they were a very big mess last season. But still, I think that they got very fortunate of just really taking advantage of field position and the Birmingham defense really getting stalled repeatedly. I am not fully bought into this DC Defenders team just yet. Again, I think their defense definitely improved, but I was also a little bit impressed with the Memphis Showboats and their improved offensive line. They were statistically the worst team in the league. They were an absolute hot mess last season in the Memphis Showboats. I think bringing in Ken Wisenhunt, him coming back, getting to call this offense. They've got Jonathan Adams, who's a clear alpha wide receiver. Again, that improved offensive line. I think they can keep this a game. In the game against Michigan, where Michigan was a better team, they were sticking around. Really, it was a 6-point game, and they were driving. They were at the 20, and then Troy Williams threw a very bad interception. It wound up being a pick six. So yeah, game kind of got out of hand, and the scoreboard didn't really reflect kind of how close that game really was. And I like Memphis getting the 8 points on the road. Memphis plus 8 there. I think Ken Wisenhunt being back is going to add some stability to this team. I like what they did in the offensive line, and I think Jonathan Adams is really an alpha wide receiver. They've got some other nice pieces there, and D. Anderson and a couple of the other guys. I think if they have EJ Perry start for them, he kind of gives them a better floor. And I think that, he's not going to have those crazy turnovers like Troy Williams is going to have. I like Memphis to kind of keep it somewhat close here. You got to give the edge to DC at home, but I'm not ready to lay 8 points with DC right now. I get it. They really played up, but I think that has a lot to do with the Birmingham offensive line issues. Birmingham just did not look good. Did not look like the same team. And really it was the trenches that really made that difference there. So give me Memphis to cover the 8 here. With a little bit of the contrarian play. I know everybody's going to be riding high off DC coming off that major win, but I think they're smelling themselves a little bit. I'm going to get a little bit of a wake-up call. So Memphis catching the 8 points there. I will be back in Memphis and the Showboats there. All right, folks, we are about halfway through. Well, we're halfway through the games, which means I got to tell you about some of the great things we got going over here on IDP Plus. First off, there is a promotion running right now. 50% off any subscription. That's right, any subscription at idpplus.com. Here's the promo code IDP 2025. All one word, all caps, IDP 2025. That will be down in the show notes if you have any questions there. Definitely going to want to check out idpplus.com. Make sure you head over there. Like we talked about, got different descriptions with different tools. You can get into access to the exclusive members only Discord. There's content that we only release to our subscribers, our members there. So you're definitely going to want to check that out because we got you covered every angle of football 24/7, 365. Also, make sure you like and follow and subscribe and do all those things. Turn on the notification notices for the IDP Plus Bets channel, which you're hearing now, which, hey, last week, 5-1, put a little cash in your pocket, throw us a bone, do us a favor, like, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you know when we go live, and then follow the rest of the ID Plus channels, right? IDP Plus, a little bit more fantasy focus. We do some work over there. I'm over there talking injuries and things like that. Just started an NFL injury deep dive series where we're going through major players, coming off major injuries, talking about season outlook. We just did Stephon Diggs, the first episode, New England Patriot Stephon Diggs. Last time we saw him, he was getting carted off with an ACL tear. Where should he be at? He's going to be expected to take a wide receiver one role in New England. Can he step up and do it? Check out that video and all the other awesome videos we got going over there. And then finally, one of the best things about the offseason is the Fantasy Football Expo. You're going to want to make sure you sign up and get your tickets over at thefantasyfootballexpo.com. All right, folks, we are heading right into Sunday, the Sunday slate. We've got a 2-game slate here, and the opener for Sunday is the Houston Roughnecks, the 0-1 Houston Roughnecks, they're heading over to Arlington. Nice little quick trip from Houston to take on the Arlington Renegades at noon Eastern time there. Roughnecks, again, 0-1. They are catching 8.5 points at -110 there. They are plus 350 on the money line. And then the Arlington Renegades, -8.5, -110. Money line sitting at -455. Over under 39 points. If I didn't mention it, I know I mentioned it in the week 1 episode. All these lines you're seeing on these slides here are going to be from DraftKings. I use either DraftKings or Bet365. That'll be where all my plays come from. And because there are a little bit of difference there. There's definitely some variety there. Want to get the best of the number, especially between those two books there. So when we get to my best bets and things like that, I'll kind of label which site's coming from which. But right now, all of these are coming from DraftKings. All right. So talking about this one, Houston and Arlington here. I think, in watching week 1, there's obviously taking notes, kind of takeaways, things like that. There were 2 things that were absolutely abundantly clear from UFL week 1. Number 1, the Arlington Renegades can run the football now. They have a competent offensive line. That is absolutely huge, absolutely massive. That is something they could not do. We all knew about Louis Perez and Sal Canala and Tyler Vaughns and that passing offense. It's going to work, right? But they couldn't run the ball worth a damn, and they were so one-dimensional. Now, in walk-in and a revamped offensive line, and Kalen Ballage, the running back, who went for 77 yards in a rush. He went over 100 yards there. They didn't have a 100-yard rusher all season last year, and he just did it in the first game. Look, this offense is going to be incredibly tough to stop. The other thing that was abundantly clear is the Houston Roughnecks are by far the worst team in the league. There is a huge separation in my mind between Houston and the rest of the UFL right now. Look, they had 170 total yards, only 6 points, and that was really in garbage time last week. They also gave up 273 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns against the St. Louis Battlehawks there. I just talked about this. Arlington can run the football now. They are going to get out to a lead, and they are going to pound the rock, and they're just going to extend this lead. I think, I'm going to keep fading Houston until they give me a reason not to. So give me Arlington at home, laying the 8.5 there. They just won, by over 20 points against a much better San Antonio team. Arlington looks legit, and Houston is about as fraudulent as teams could come there. They've got a lot of problems. Yes, Houston, we have many problems that you need to address. So give me Arlington laying the 8.5 at home. Love Arlington in this matchup. All right, the last and final game on the slate, and we are talking about an old XFL matchup, and this was the XFL Conference Championship game where we got the San Antonio Brahmas taking on the St. Louis Battlehawks. You know, they played this game. This was the last game for St. Louis. They and San Antonio won 25-15 in the Battle Dome there. St. Louis or San Antonio won 2 of the 3 matchups. St. Louis did get them at home last year in a 13-12 barn burner. Now we've got the 0-1 San Antonio Brahmas taking on the 1-0 St. Louis Battlehawks Sunday, 6:30 Eastern Time in St. Louis again at that Battle Dome there. Great fan base. Can't wait to see. I'm excited to see some. DC had some nice fan involvement. I'm excited to see St. Louis and see where they're at. Arlington, hey, look, they're coming off a big win, so hopefully they could get some more fans in the building there. And Michigan is not a bad support system there up in Ford Field. All those hopefully Lion fans can just come out and get behind the hometown team there. But yeah, St. Louis by far the best home environment here. So we have San Antonio Brahmas catching 7 points on the road there. 0-1 San Antonio Brahmas. You have the St. Louis Battlehawks obviously laying 7 at home. The Brahmas are plus 280 on the money line, and St. Louis minus 355 the other way there. Look, St. Louis was very impressive in the first matchup. Now, it's kind of part of the I just spent 5 minutes telling you about how bad this Houston Roughnecks team is. So it's a little bit tough, in my opinion. An over/under, sitting at 39.5 there for this game. So a couple things. Look, St. Louis, absolutely. Manny Wilkins. It was the Manny Wilkins coming out party. He looked very, very good. 189 pass yards, 77% completion percentage, 43 rush yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. He did everything and more that you could ask for. But again, they ran for 273 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. They kind of did whatever they wanted. But it was the Houston Roughnecks. And I don't want to, you have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is not a good football team as far as the Houston Roughnecks. St. Louis, I still think this is the week we're going to be able to see a little bit more of who they are this season. Now, San Antonio is coming off a game where they just disappointed in just about every way. Kellen Mond was, I think yikes is the best way to put it, probably politely. He did not look very good. Their kicker and destroying, he missed a field goal by about 30 yards to the left there. It was just a lot that did not go right for them. However, I'm not ready to just sell the farm on the San Antonio team right now. They have a lot of talent. Hopefully Wade Phillips, with all his coaching experience, he can turn this around relatively quickly. That defense, they've taken a step back, it seems, especially in the run defense area. Arlington was able to kind of run on them a little bit. But I think it just kind of got punched in the mouth and they just weren't ready for it. I think they come back and are a bit more prepared there. I will be taking San Antonio, +7 here. I think it's just they're too talented of a team to be catching that many points right now. I think Kellen Mond and, look, they've still got John Trey Kirkland, Jacob Harris, the tall wide receiver coming out of UCF. Him and Mond had a nice connection there. They've got Greg Ward coming over from the NFL. They've got Anthony McFarland, John Lovett, Joshua Corbin. They've got guys. They've got solid playmakers. I think they just need to put it together. And on defense, again, they're running back a lot of that defense that was one of the best in the league last season. So I'm not ready to just sell the farm. I get it. St. Louis looked very good, but they played such a dog shit Houston Roughnecks team. It was difficult to really read too much into that, right? So I'm going to go San Antonio +7 there. Definitely St. Louis is one of the only teams that does have a home edge. So I think that could play a little bit of a factor there. But I think that San Antonio, again, I'm just going to ride this ship one more time. It was the only play I got wrong last week. Let's hope it's not the case there. But I have a hard time believing with all that talent on the roster that they're just going to go out and lay another egg there. I think Wade Phillips gets them ready. And I'm not quite ready to write St. Louis, write their check into the championship game or anything like that just because they beat the shit out of Houston. I think everybody's going to do that this year. I will also be playing the over in this game, over 39.5, one of 2 totals that I like enough to play this week. I do think St. Louis is going to be able to score. I also think San Antonio is. I think there's going to be some turnovers in this game. I think both these defenses are opportunistic. And I think both these offenses have enough firepower to light up the scoreboard a bit. It's in a dome, so we don't have to worry about any weather or anything like that. So, look, St. Louis put up 31 points by themselves last week. San Antonio did only put up 9. I do think they have a little bit of a better performance there. So give me the over in that matchup. All right. Now's the time we're all been waiting for. It is best bets and DGen play time. It is a synopsis of everything we just talked about. And let's talk about what are my favorite bets for UFL week 2 here. Again, went 2-0 on best bets last week. And then on the DGen play, went 1-0. Cashed a nice little plus 200. That's kind of the format we're going to do. Now, I failed to mention this before, but the kind of the way that I'm playing it and the way I would advise you to play it is, all the plays I give out, just a single unit on those plays, but the best bet plays elevated to 2 units, right? These are the ones I feel most confident about. So the way I'm doing it, the way I would advise you, I feel the best about these plays, so I'm going to put 2 units on these plays, right? So for example, last week gave out 6 bets total, 4 of them, 3 normal picks, 1 DGen play, 1 unit. And then the 2 best bets put 2 units on, right? We came up about 6.5 units in the profit just from week 1. Week 1 was nice, right? It's not, I wish gambling was that easy. It's not always going to be that green, but we're hoping to capitalize and keep that momentum going here in week 2. And without further ado, best bets for UFL week 2. First up, going back to the well, give me Michigan plus 1.5 there, minus 105. This is the number over on Bet 365. I think they come away with the outright win. So if you want to take them on the money line at plus 110, I don't blame you there. But they did lose to Birmingham by 1 point last season. So, I'll take the plus 1.5 at the minus 105 there, because the UFL games get a little crazy. So to reiterate my points here, the Michigan Panthers will be at home. They'll be in their dome environment. They got revenge on their mind. They lost to this team 3 times in a row, and they really had a chance to beat them in every single game. So I think they're hungry for a victory. They smell some blood in the water, especially that defense. They see that porous offensive line, and they know that they can take an opportunity and advantage of that porous offensive line for the Birmingham Stallions. So give me Michigan plus 1.5, a minus 105 there. Also, give me Memphis. I think Ken Wisenhunt coming back and, adding some stability, head coach, play caller, he was there in the training camp. Everyone thought he was going to be coaching, and they had a little bit of a shakeup. And honestly, they performed pretty damn well. Caused me to be sweating my Michigan ticket just a little bit last week there. That kind of score, again, kind of Kua pick 6 to kind of end the game there. It kind of inflated the score a little bit. So, give me Memphis plus 8. I am not ready to, say this DC Defenders team is as good as any of the Birmingham Stallions teams in the past. I just think Birmingham might be having a down year, at least had a down week. I do think DC is a little bit improved from last season, but I'm not ready to lay 8 points with them against the Memphis team that I think is going to be scrappy here. I think Ken Wisenhunt, the head coach, again, being back. Jonathan Adams is going to be a problem for that secondary. So give me Memphis plus 8 there. And then my DGen play of the week, give me Arlington minus 15.5 at plus 200. I've said it once, and I'm going to say it again. I am going to fade the Houston Roughnecks until they give me a reason to not. This Houston Roughnecks team is rough, for lack of a better word, right? Arlington was my most impressive team. They were someone who last season I kept, falling into that trap. Look at the talent on offense. They've Louis Perez. They've got to be able to put it together. Well, they've improved their offensive line. They have a running game, and the defense was very scrappy last week, man. I am very impressed with this Arlington Renegades team. Probably the team I walked away most impressed with from week 1, given their opponent and given what they put on the field there. They just beat a much better San Antonio team by 20 plus points. So I think they can absolutely handle Houston. And the UFL, look, we had several blowouts. They're known for blowouts, right? If there's some disparity between the teams, they don't mind running up the score. So give me Arlington minus 15.5 at plus 200. All right, folks, that pretty much wraps it up for UFL Week 2. I do want to mention player props. They're a thing this season. I from what I could tell, looking around, ESPN Bet seems to be the best, the most available options. So was dabbling in that a little bit last week. Definitely going to kind of run that back with the props here. So because those lines are not out at this time, they'll probably drop closer to when the depth charts come out Thursday, Friday ish, maybe even Wednesday. Follow me on X at the DGen Doc. Very easy to find. That's where I'll be posting all my player prop plays. They've got anytime touchdowns. They've got first touchdowns. They've got your classic, rushing, passing, receiving, things like that. So looking for some extra ways to kind of profit off this league here. I will say player props can be a little tricky because these UFL coaches, depth charts aren't always the most truthful. They're pretty funny and funky with their player usage and personnel. So it is a little bit more volatile. Definitely feel better with my units going to the sides and totals. But definitely, if that's something you want to dabble in with the player props, follow me on X at the DGen Doc. Also, I'll just be posting, NFL, whether it's the draft, injury. If you like football, give me a follow because that's pretty much all I talk about. So, all right, y'all. Hey, last week, 5-1. Let's go for the full sweep here in UFL Week 2. At the end of the day, we are happy we've got football back. But don't forget, follow, subscribe, give us a shout out. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking. Let us know who you're rooting for, what your favorite bet is. Let's get the comment section going off. And for UFL Week 2 game breakdowns and best bets, this is the DGen Doc signing off.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.